In a world that is just flooded with information, it seems like skepticism about faith is everywhere, specifically when it comes to the person of Jesus. So why is that? In this explainer, we're going to dive into a source that tries to answer that exact question.
So let's just get right to it. The big question we're digging into today is this: why do so many people either misunderstand or flat out reject Jesus? The material we're looking at proposes a few key reasons, and we're going to break them down one by one.
First off, the source points out that this skepticism isn't just one thing. It actually takes a few different forms. For some people, it's a hard no, a complete denial of his divinity. For others, it's more like, yeah, he was a great moral teacher, but that's it. And then there's another group that sees him as just one option among many, one valid path to God in a world full of them.
Okay, so where does all this doubt really begin? Well, the source argues that the first major barrier isn't really intellectual at all. It's emotional. It starts with those really hard, painful questions that life just throws at every single one of us. And it often kicks off with maybe the toughest question imaginable. If there's a good and all-powerful God out there, then why is the world so full of pain and suffering?
And that question, of course, leads to an even more personal one that just cuts right to the bone. Why do innocent people, especially kids, have to die? And finally, you just have to look around at the world, at the injustice, and you can't help but ask, why does it feel like the bad guys so often win while good people get crushed? Now, here's what's so fascinating. The source makes this really sharp distinction. It says that people of faith and skeptics, they're often asking the exact same questions. The huge difference is where they go with them. For the skeptic, the question is often a dead end, a roadblock. But for the person of faith, that same question is the start of a conversation with God. All right, so moving from the heart to the head, the second barrier the source brings up is all about our intellectual starting point. It's about the ideas and assumptions, the preconceptions we bring to the table before we even look at any of the evidence.
And this is the key takeaway here. Our pre-existing beliefs, they act like a filter or a lens. And that lens doesn't just, color what we see. The source argues it actually changes how we interpret the facts themselves. The source uses this fantastic analogy to make the point. So imagine this. If your starting assumption is that someone is dangerous, and then you see them pick up a knife, what's your first thought? Your mind instantly jumps to the conclusion that they mean to cause harm, right? The action itself is neutral, but your starting point decides the outcome. But now, let's just flip that. What if you completely trust that exact same person, and you see them pick up the exact same knife? What do you think then? You probably just figure they're about to make dinner. See? Same action, same evidence, but a totally different starting point gives you a completely different conclusion.
And this leads to a really important tension. The source suggests that faith and reason aren't enemies. They're actually partners. They need each other. Reason all by itself, it claims, can lead to pride, where you can't see past your own intellect. But on the other hand, faith without any reason can be kind of shallow and easy to knock over. The argument is that you absolutely need both for true understanding.
So that brings us to our third barrier. And this one is a little more subtle, but wow, is it powerful. It's all about the difference between knowing a bunch of facts about someone and actually truly knowing them personally.
So the source breaks it down into two types of knowledge. First, you've got head knowledge. This is all about information, facts, history, dates, theology. But then there's heart knowledge, which isn't about information at all. It's about personal transformation.
This quote from the text just explains it perfectly. Think about it. You could read every astronomy textbook ever written. You could know every single fact about the sun, its size, its temperature, what it's made of. But do you really understand the sun until you step outside and just feel its warmth on your skin? That feeling, that's the experience. That's the personal knowledge.
And that leads us to the final and, according to the source, the single biggest barrier of them all. After you've wrestled with the pain, with your own preconceptions, with the limits of what you can know, it all comes down to one thing: humility. This specific claim from the Gospel of John is presented as the ultimate challenge. And just notice how exclusive it is. It doesn't say I am a way, it says I am the way. The source argues that this claim directly confronts not just our desire to have lots of options, but our own deep-seated sense of self-importance. So, what does it really take to accept a claim like that? Well, according to this text, it's nothing less than a total surrender of the self. It means you have to admit, I am not the center of my own universe.
It means acknowledging I am not totally self-sufficient. And ultimately, it means you have to concede there is a problem so deep inside me that I cannot save myself. And that, the source says, is the biggest stumbling block for our pride.
And so we're left with this final, really provocative question. It frames the whole thing not as a choice between evidence and ignorance, but as a choice of posture. Are we going to demand that God answer every single one of our questions, on our terms, before we believe? Or are we going to choose to trust first, with the faith that understanding will follow? It's a really powerful question to think about.